Welcome to Wisdom Synergy, where knowledge meets collective power.
So in 1916, a fire ripped through Paris, Texas. And it burned hot enough to literally melt 1,440 solid stone and brick buildings right to the ground.
Yeah, completely leveled them.
Completely leveled. Yet, inexplicably, only 3 people died in that entire blaze.
Right, which mainstream history just calls a statistical anomaly.
Yeah.
You know, a tragic alignment of dry weather, wind, and poor urban planning.
But there's this massive, really rapidly growing online community that looks at that exact same fire and says, no, this is proof that our entire historical timeline is a fabrication.
It is a wild theory.
It is. And that is exactly the wild rabbit hole we are jumping into for today's deep dive. Welcome, everyone. We are looking at this stack of sources that somehow bridges the gap between really rigorous peer-reviewed geophysics and these heavily debated viral internet investigations into what they call old world anomalies.
Yeah, the old world theories. They are fascinating to look at.
They really are.
Yeah.
So our mission today is to impartially explore this highly provocative alternative theory for you. The idea that ancient catacombs and historic monuments aren't just, religious sites, but the remnants of an advanced, erased global civilization.
And taking it even a step further, the claim that these structures were actually built to function as technological machines.
Yes. Which sounds like a sci-fi thriller, honestly. But we're going to examine the evidence presented by these alternative theorists side by side with mainstream archaeological and acoustic research.
Exactly. Because while the overarching claims of this hidden, erased civilization are highly, highly speculative, they are actually tapping into very real, scientifically documented properties of ancient structures.
Yeah.
Exploring the mechanics of these sites, it really will completely change how you view the historic buildings in your own city.
Okay, so let's start with the mechanism of this supposed historical erasure.
Yeah.
Because the alternative narrative hinges on what they call the Great Fire cover-up.
Right, the 19th century resets.
Exactly. The theory posits that in the 18th and 19th centuries, a highly advanced global civilization was intentionally wiped out to, reset the historical board. And the weapon of choice was a highly suspicious string of devastating urban fires.
And the pattern they point out is certainly visually striking when you lay all the historical records side by side. During that period, nearly every major city experienced a catastrophic fire that supposedly cleared the way for modern development.
And when you look at the specific evidence from the sources, it forces you to pause for a second. Take the Great Chicago Fire.
Right, the famous cow in the barn.
Yeah, mainstream history blames a cow knocking over a lantern. But the alternative theorists, they point to photographs of the aftermath, and you see these massive stone and masonry buildings completely calcified and leveled.
It looks like the aftermath of a modern bombing campaign, honestly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not a wood fire. And then Toronto had a massive fire in 1904, destroying over 100 old world stone buildings with 0 reported deaths.
0.
Montreal in 1852 lost a quarter of the city, left 10,000 people homeless, and again, 0 reported deaths.
So those incredibly low casualty rates, combined with the sheer thermal destruction, that really forms the major pillar of their argument.
Okay, let's unpack this thermal destruction part, because this is where the theory actually gets its teeth. A typical wood house fire burns at around, 1,100 degrees Fahrenheit?
They're vertic, yeah.
But to melt solid stone and brick masonry, you need temperatures consistently hitting 1,500 to 2,000 degrees.
Right, a lantern in a barn does not generate the thermal mass required to turn granite into slag.
Exactly. So that discrepancy in thermodynamics leads these alternative sources to a pretty explosive conclusion. They suggest these weren't structural fires at all. They were targeted, high-yield demolitions designed to clear out the monumental architecture of this previous advanced civilization.
But logically, and this is the core logistical flaw that skeptics raise, how could a worldwide conspiracy pull off carpet-bombing major urban centers without a single person noticing the explosives?
Right. You cannot just blow up downtown Chicago, blame a farm animal, and expect millions of residents to ignore the sound of artillery.
You really can't. So the alternative theory attempts to reconcile that by pointing back to those miraculously low death tolls you mentioned.
Okay.
To the theorists, the lack of casualties suggests these cities were already empty at the time. They propose a scenario where the population was somehow removed or eliminated beforehand, and the fires were simply controlled demolition sweeps.
Like clearing out the empty shells of these old world cities before migrating new populations in to establish our current timeline.
Exactly. Like a massive global real estate clearance project where the tenants were already evicted.
Wow.
But, to maintain our objectivity, we really have to look at how mainstream historians interpret these exact same events.
Fair enough. What do they say?
The conventional consensus views these as entirely explainable disasters. Rapidly expanding cities were built predominantly with wooden infrastructure, just crammed around the older stone centers.
Right.
You had incredibly poor fire safety standards, narrow streets that basically acted as wind tunnels, and virtually no modern firefighting equipment. So a wooden city essentially becomes a massive kiln.
Oh, a kiln. That makes sense.
Yeah, it raises the ambient temperature high enough to damage the stone structures trapped inside that inferno.
It does make sense from a mainstream perspective. But looking at the sources, you can see how the sheer repetition of these events. I mean, a historic city center burns down, miraculously few people die, and it's rapidly rebuilt. It provides really fertile ground for an alternative narrative.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
The pattern is compelling if you view it through the lens of intentional design.
But that creates a massive logical problem, right? If an entire advanced civilization was wiped off the surface of the earth and their cities were leveled, where's the physical evidence of the people themselves?
You can't just misplace millions of bodies.
Exactly.
You can't.
Well, the alternative theorists argue the evidence hasn't gone anywhere. They claim you just have to look directly beneath your feet, which takes us underground. I mean, our sources detail the real-world catacombs found directly beneath major churches and cities globally, and the scale is it's difficult to comprehend. How many bodies are we actually talking about down there?
The numbers are staggering. The Paris catacombs alone contain the remains of an estimated 6 million people.
That's million.
Yeah. Beneath St. James Church in Brno, Czechia, there are roughly 50,000 skeletons. The Sedlic ossuary holds up to 70,000.
Wow.
The Capela dos Ossos in Portugal holds about 5,000. We are talking about a subterranean presence of humanity that rivals the populations of modern major cities.
But mainstream history tells us this was just a practical response to a public health crisis, right?
Yeah.
Like urban cemeteries were overflowing in the 1700s, disease was spreading, so they just moved everyone into abandoned quarries.
Right, that is the accepted historical record. Exhumation and relocation for public health.
Let's apply some real-world logistics to that, though, because it sounds like an infrastructural nightmare. If officials in Paris moved 6 million bodies in the 18th century using horse-drawn wagons,
Yeah, let's do the math.
let's say a wagon holds 20 bodies. That is 300,000 separate, grueling trips through the streets. You have to exhume rotting corpses, boil the bones to clean them, sort them by type, and then transport them underground.
All without a heavily documented industrialized workforce.
Exactly. How could that be done secretly or even practically?
The math does paint a very complicated picture of the labor involved. I mean, it would require a monumental civic effort lasting decades.
And the alternative theory looks at that math and offers a much darker interpretation. They argue these are not overflowing cemeteries. They claim these millions of bodies are the dismantled remains of that erased civilization, the victims of the global reset.
And they base this on the bizarre, unsettling way the bones are actually arranged down there.
Right. They are not just piled up in a corner. If you walk through the Paris Catacombs or Sedlic, you see these perfectly symmetrical walls built by alternating rows of human skulls with femurs.
Yeah, very precise geometric arrangements.
You see massive chandeliers constructed from every single bone in the human body. And the theorists ask this chilling question: where is the rest of the skeleton?
Right, you see thousands of skulls and thigh bones, but what happened to the ribs, the hands?
The feet, yeah. The theory posits these aren't respectful relocations. They are trophies of a conquered people, intentionally dismantled, sorted like inventory, and put on display by whoever inherited the earth.
It is a profoundly macabre narrative, but again, to understand the mainstream archaeological perspective, we have to look at the cultural mindset of the era.
Okay, what's the mainstream take on the chandeliers of bones?
Mainstream science interprets these geometric bone arrangements as an expression of memento mori. It's a Latin phrase translating to remember that you must die.
I always thought of memento mori as just like a painting of a skull on a desk.
It was much broader than that. It was a really pervasive spiritual and artistic movement. For centuries, humanity had a much closer, more visceral relationship with death. Arranging bones into elaborate symmetrical patterns was not viewed as a desecration or a trophy display.
Oh, really?
No, it was a way of honoring the dead while creating a philosophical environment for the living. The architecture basically forces anyone walking through those tunnels to confront their own mortality.
That turns a horrifying logistical problem into like A massive, immersive art installation.
Exactly.
But what about the secrecy today? Our sources mention that out of the 179 miles of tunnels beneath Paris, only about 1 mile is open to the public.
Yeah.
There is literally a special French police unit, the Catacombs, whose sole job is to patrol the darkness and keep urban explorers out. So the alternative theorists naturally assume they are guarding the remaining evidence of this lost civilization.
Well, the official stance is that the unmapped tunnels are structurally unsound and incredibly dangerous. But the practice of restricting access to subterranean sites and specifically placing prominent churches directly over them is a heavily documented historical phenomenon.
Like a power move.
Yes, it is a way of overlaying new religious power onto older sacred spaces. The sources actually highlight recent archaeological discoveries beneath the Church of San Pablo in Mitla, Mexico.
Oh, right, the Zapotec site.
Exactly.
Huh.
Researchers found a vast underground labyrinth built by the ancient Zapotecs. They believed this labyrinth, called Leoba, was the literal entrance to the underworld. When Spanish missionaries arrived, they didn't just destroy the site, they intentionally built their Catholic church directly on top of it and sealed the entrance.
It is a calculated architectural move to absorb and overwrite the spiritual authority of the previous culture.
Precisely.
Which brings a specific eerie detail from the alternative sources into a new light for me. In several of these European bone crypts, there is a phrase placed prominently above the doorways for visitors to read. What you are now, we once were. What we are now, you shall be.
A classic textbook memento mori epitaph.
Right. But if you view it through the lens of a conquering civilization overlaying their power, the alternative theorists see that phrase not as a philosophical reminder, but as a literal threat.
A message from the architects of the reset.
Yeah, saying we wiped them out and we can do it to you. And that dark interpretation leads us to the wildest, most fascinating leap in today's deep dive.
Here we go.
What if these geometric bone layouts and the massive cathedrals built directly on top of them weren't just decorative or symbolic? What if they were built to function together as a machine?
This is where the alternative theories leave conventional architectural history entirely and cross over into the realm of ancient technological systems.
They start with the biological material itself. According to the scientific papers in our sources, human bone possesses documented piezoelectric properties.
Right, let's break down how piezoelectricity actually works, because it is a factual material property.
Please do.
Bone is largely composed of collagen fibers and a crystalline mineral called hydroxyapatite. When you apply mechanical stress to that crystalline structure, whether through physical pressure or intense vibration, it physically deforms the crystals just enough to push their internal electrical charges out of balance.
And that creates electricity.
Yes, this generates a measurable electric current.
Think of a standard barbecue lighter. When you click the trigger, a tiny hammer strikes a quartz crystal inside, and that mechanical impact generates the electric spark that lights the gas. The theorists are pointing out that human bone functions on that exact same principle.
Under the right conditions of stress or vibration, bone creates a bioelectric charge.
So the alternative theory takes that biological fact and applies it to the architecture. They suggest that the incredibly powerful, massive pipe organs installed in these historic churches weren't just designed for musical worship.
Right.
They were intentional vibrational engines. The theory claims the organ drives specific low-frequency sound waves down into the floor, vibrating the millions of geometrically arranged skulls and femurs in the labyrinth below,
Causing the piezoelectric crystalline structure of the bones to generate an electromagnetic field.
Yes. They are basically suggesting these ancient churches were giant architectural circuit boards. The catacombs act as the circuitry, the human bones acts as the piezoelectric wiring, and the massive pipe organ acts as the power source.
It is a stunning visual.
And the goal of this machine, to generate an electromagnetic field that echoes back up into the cathedral, to stimulate the brain waves, and alter the consciousness of the congregation sitting in the pews.
The idea of a bone-powered mind control machine, it really projects modern concepts of circuitry and electromagnetic manipulation onto ancient masonry.
Is it possible, scientifically?
From a rigorous scientific standpoint, the energy generated by piezoelectricity in dead bone is microscopic. It wouldn't create a field strong enough to manipulate a crowd. However, and this is key, as is so often the case with these viral theories, there is a profound, scientifically validated truth hidden right beneath the speculation.
And that truth has to do with the acoustic engineering, doesn't it? Even if the bones aren't literal batteries, the sound itself is doing something physical.
Absolutely. If we look at the expert archaeoacoustic research provided in the sources, ancient builders possessed a breathtakingly sophisticated understanding of how sound affects the human body. Ancient underground structures absolutely do possess intentional, measurable, resonant frequencies.
Our sources specifically highlight the Hypogeum of Malta. It is a massive subterranean maze carved out of solid rock, and interestingly enough, it was found containing the skeletal remains of 7,000 individuals.
A subterranean maze filled with bones. It fits the pattern perfectly.
And when acoustic engineers tested the Hypogeum, along with other ancient sites like the Newgrange Tomb in Ireland, they discovered that these underground chambers are perfectly tuned to a dominant resonance frequency of precisely 110 to 112 hertz.
And that specific frequency is not an architectural accident.
Why is 110 hertz so important? Like, what does a low hum actually do to us?
It triggers a documented physiological response. Scientific experiments monitoring human brain activity have shown that exposure to resonant frequencies at 110 hertz actively alters cognitive processing. Yes. The human brain is divided into hemispheres. Usually, our left hemisphere, which manages logic, language, and analytical thought, is highly active. But when subjected to 110 hertz, the left hemisphere begins to quiet down. Dominance temporarily shifts to the right hemisphere, which processes emotion, intuition, and spatial awareness.
Wait, really? So just standing inside a stone room, tuned to 110 hertz, literally shuts down the logical part of your brain and heightens your emotional center?
Yes. Within minutes, the physical vibration of the sound waves interacting with your nervous system can induce altered states of consciousness. It literally changes your perception of reality.
Think about how a wooden acoustic guitar works. The hollow body of the guitar is a resonance chamber designed to amplify and shape the vibration of a single string. What you are describing is that exact same principle, but on a massive architectural scale, where the human nervous system is the string being played.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. Synthesizing this data, the alternative theorists aren't entirely wrong to label these ancient structures as machines. In a very real mechanical sense, the acoustic engineering of these sacred spaces functioned as a technology designed to transform human perception. These weren't just places to sit and listen. They were meticulously engineered environments built to elevate spiritual experiences and physically force the mind into a trance state during rituals.
So they didn't need a literal sci-fi circuit board or a hidden electrical grid, because the architecture itself was the technology. The building was the instrument, and the human mind was the receiver.
This really reframes how we view historical timelines, doesn't it? Whether you entertain the idea of a secret cabal manipulating a global reset, or you trust the mainstream archaeological record, the truth is equally profound.
Yeah.
Humanity has always maintained an incredibly complex physical and acoustic relationship with death and the unseen world.
The system operating today, the grand cathedrals, the bone ossuaries, the subterranean crypts, it might not be a sinister hidden plot, but it is the undeniable physical legacy of how our ancestors sought to connect with the divine. They built monumental acoustic machines out of stone and bone to bridge the gap between the living and the dead.
And they possessed an understanding of human biology and acoustics that we are only just beginning to map with modern technology.
It is incredible.
Yeah.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, and it ties all these wild concepts together. We just discussed how a frequency of 110 hertz can physically alter human brainwaves.
Right.
And earlier, we discussed the bizarre, incredibly precise geometric patterns of the skulls and femurs stacked in the catacombs. Well, there was a fascinating field of physics called cymatics.
Oh, yes. The study of how sound waves physically organize matter.
Exactly. If you take a metal plate, cover it in a thin layer of sand, and play a specific audio frequency through it, the physical vibrations will force the chaotic sand into a perfect, complex geometric pattern. As the pitch changes, the geometry changes. It is a physical manifestation of sound.
It makes the invisible waves visible.
Right. So if these ancient builders were sophisticated enough to engineer a massive subterranean room to resonate at exactly 110 hertz to alter human consciousness, is it possible that the perfectly symmetrical arrangements of millions of bones in the catacombs weren't just laid out by hand for artistic decoration?
Wow.
What if those skulls and femurs were designed to physically map the shape of the standing sound waves echoing through the earth?
The idea that the bone patterns are a cymatic blueprint of a sacred frequency. I mean, that is a staggering thought.
It really is. It is something to keep in mind the next time you step into a historic cathedral. If you've ever felt that deep vibration in your chest when a massive pipe organ starts playing, echoing through the stone floors and down into the dark, you might just be standing inside the machine.